Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Ryan Noonan, joined here, as always, by my friends to talk size and totals for Championship Sunday. Connor Allen, what's going on, bud?
Yeah, it's an exciting week of games here. I'm one of the last few ones with multiple games, so I don't know. It's one of those things where the more I break these games down, the less exciting I think they'll be, which is kind of sad. But you know, I mean, I'm excited to watch them from a pure football standpoint. I just think that some people might be disappointed with the style of gameplay. So we'll get into that more later.
Yeah, I mean, from a betting standpoint, it is obviously, we are talking about sides and totals. They're very efficient markets when you only have two. I think even when you only have say 14 or 15, this is obviously one of the most efficient markets in the world. That we are, a couple days into these lines, so they are very efficient. But I'm super excited to get your guys' thoughts here. And obviously, donning a Chiefs jersey, Patty Mahomes here. Clark is fired up and ready to go. Joining us as always, Sharp Clark. What's up, bud?
Yeah, you're exactly right. These markets matured faster than in a typical week, and that's partly because there's only two games to analyze, and partly because limits started higher and raised more aggressively quicker. I mean, I don't know what Circa's at now, but yesterday on a Tuesday they were taking $75,000 on sides, and so that's what dictates how mature the market is. And so typically when we do this show on a Wednesday, I still feel pretty good about some of the sides and totals and how we might be able to get ahead of line movement. This is not one of those shows. These lines are very, very sharp. And so to the extent that you're betting at this point in the week on those major markets, you're doing so because either for fun or you think you have an edge that's not captured by the market, which is rare. But I just want to throw that caveat out there as we get diving into these games.
Yeah, it's an important point for sure. They are mature markets, but hey, we'll give our thoughts here. As we've been doing all season here on Wednesdays on the 4for4 Bets YouTube channel, we'll still have a Super Bowl show to be determined or to figure out what that looks like at different iterations over the years in terms of the Super Bowl show. So again, subscribe to the channel, 4for4 Bets on YouTube, podcast in your podcast feed, wherever you listen as well, typically on Wednesday evening. Come back on Friday. It'll be a prop drop show. That gets a little bit harder. I think the conference championship prop drop show is one of the hardest ones to do because also props come out way earlier. So we're waiting for lines typically on a prop show or some stuff that just pop before the show. No, that will not be the case on Friday. We'll do our best to give you some good, no stale bread lines, some stuff that we are interested in there as well. Super Bowl prop show obviously takes on a different look because the menu is very extensive. We typically get a little bit more here for conference championships. We just don't get the off the wall type of menu that we'll have for Super Bowl, but we'll be there again, 3 p.m. Eastern Friday, 4for4 Bets YouTube channel as well. The betting subscription massively discounted, $9.99 right now. 4for4.com/plans gets you access to all that we do again to the end of February. So that'll get you a little bit of MMA. That'll get you some NBA on top of the football stuff that remains. But again, just to let you get your foot in the door, let you see what that subscription looks like in terms of all the season-long stuff that you could possibly want, all the tools. So I think the tools are a massive add as well if you play season-long articles, projections, rankings, all that stuff as well. And then gets you into our Discord, which is where we push all the official plays as well. So you can check that out on the site, 4for4.com/plans. All right. Before we jump into the conference championship, season ended last week for the Texans, Packers, Bucks, and Bills. We're going to touch in depth on the teams that knocked them out. But before we do, I want to get you guys' thoughts on whether it's those games or I think more so in terms of team building. Because look, we're coming up to the end of the season. And I think last year, Connor, we were looking at this the other day. We took a week or so off, and then we jumped right into off-season stuff, draft, team building type stuff. So we'll probably take a 1 week hiatus, but we will be back here doing shows all season long. We'll start to get into more of what are the cap situations? What does the draft look like? Let's start there. I'll start with you, Connor, in terms of any of the teams you want to touch on. Obviously, Texans and Packers, I think, have a similar build in terms of maybe they found long-term answers at quarterback. There go the Packers again, finding another long-term answer at quarterback. Bucks are kind of maybe in a spot where they're going to do something with the quarterback, and then the Bills are, what do they do? Do they kind of continue on or do they rebuild? What are your thoughts on before they got eliminated?
Yeah, the Texans are a fun one because they had so much success without a very good offensive line. They were partially injured, partially just didn't have much talent. Like if they have a better offensive line and can establish a running game, I think that unlocks a whole new level to what they want to do. Whereas like, it's kind of been what they did this year was, run on first down way too frequently, not have that much success. And then CJ Stroud bailed them out in second and third down. If he's not forced to bail them out on, the later downs in bad situations, the cap for this offense is like, I mean, CJ Stroud, I would assume, will be a very popular MVP bet next season. So I'm excited to see what his number comes in at. And then Jordan Love in this Packers offense, I mean, they had a great streak. They had an awesome end of the season. Count me as someone who's like, excited and cautiously optimistic about Jordan Love next season, but I certainly will not be betting his MVP numbers at like chalky numbers if they're super high. It's just, like I could see one of those things being massively inflated there. And then the Bills are a tough one. I mean, I think that they were just mostly really injured. I think their defense is still fine. Like obviously it sucks because they're losing in their win now window. It becomes tougher with the cap situation. But at the end of the day, they still have an awesome quarterback, Josh Allen. They still have a lot of good players. Like, obviously it feels like the sky is falling now, but I don't think it's the end of the world for the next few years.
Yeah. No, I think those are all good points. Hard to not be optimistic about all things Texans. They have a shit ton of cap space as well. But again, part of that is like, on the defensive side, they had a lot of like small deals, so they're going to have to replenish the defensive side of the ball. They have a coach that I think we all buy into in terms of, being able to schematically get that team to maybe overperform again. Cause I think that's kind of what happened here down the stretch. We know the Packers whole narrative around, and part of our optimism was around them being a young football team and the continuity that could come as they grow and mature. The cap situation is a little bit different. So let's see what happens there, but they extended Jordan Love at the start of the season, so they have one extra year there on his deal, which I think is interesting. Bucks kind of in purgatory, Clark. I'd love to get your thoughts, Connor. Kind of skip them because I don't know what to do with him either, because it's like the division is kind of still like a weird spot. We're going to be in the same spot, like the magic that the Saints are going to have to do to move cap money again that they do every year. You're just like, how do they end up fielding a team is going to be weird. But now I think with what happened with Baker, they probably end up signing him to some sort of hopefully team-friendly deal for a year or two. But that's really interesting because that might be enough to win the division, but does that really pull you forward? So thoughts on the Bucks and any of the other teams that have left us here?
Yeah, the Bucks are in a tough spot team building wise because, like you said, the division is winnable for the foreseeable future. They have a quarterback who's capable in Baker Mayfield, but he's just not ever going to be the guy that takes you over the top the way that, if Jordan Love hits his upside, he could do it. CJ Stroud, I think we've already seen, can do it. Mahomes, all those kind of guys. Mayfield's not that guy. So I think if I'm the Bucks, I'm thinking of team rebuilding the same way the Chiefs did, where they kind of remained competitive with Alex Smith while they knew that their ceiling was capped. And then they brought in Mahomes as a project to try to, eventually take over Alex Smith. And so after a year, they were comfortable putting him in there, and it worked, and it's great and all that kind of stuff. I think if you go the hard tank, I think there's a lot. It's like harder to dig yourself out of that. We're seeing that with Carolina right now. You miss on the number one quarterback, you set yourself back. You're dealing with different coaches. I think the Bucks need to try to keep winning with Baker Mayfield while they sort of under the surface build for the future. And I don't know if that's drafting a quarterback in the first, late in the first round or in the second round, maybe, that you think is a good prospect that can develop, or something like that. But I think Baker is probably going to be the starter for the Bucks next year. He did enough to earn it, and I think the Bucks are good enough of a roster, even if Mike Evans leaves, that they can continue to compete in that division.
They did a great job this offseason getting their cap in a manageable situation moving forward too. So that was probably the best thing the Bucks did, and part of why it looked like, I thought coming into the season, they were definitely in like proactive tank mode to kind of build for the future. But the division was so poor that they were able to stumble into being competitive because no one really wanted to go out and win that one. I'd love to see T. Higgins in Houston. He's going to get the back from someone. That would be really nice to just kind of lean into, like, hey, look, you did a great job last year. We all kind of questioned it on draft day with the move that they made to go 2-3 to give up all that equity to lock up CJ Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. They were both fantastic. But now you're in that win now window with a rookie quarterback. Like, just kind of push in, figure it out. I think you can make a splash defensively, but man, T. Higgins is maybe one of the better offensive weapons that's going to be out there. That would be a fun landing spot for him. So, cautiously optimistic. I think that Division 2, the South, is interesting with Anthony Richardson coming back. What happens with Jacksonville bouncing back? So that's maybe not going to be the crap division that we thought maybe coming into the season. There's, maybe some potential there for multiple playoff teams. So, all right, let's get into the goods, real goods. All right, Kansas City on the road, kicking off this weekend in Baltimore. It's open to 3.5 in most spots. It was juiced towards the Chiefs, down to 3 briefly. And it was bounced all the way back up to 4 a bit yesterday. And we're basically holding right now 3.5 minus 110 in most spots. Totals held steady the entire time, basically 44.5. This is Lamar's first AFC title game, 6 straight for Patrick Mahomes, as we know, first on the road. I find this market to be absolutely fascinating. I want to get your thoughts here first, Clark. I'm not originating, but I have to think if you're relying on in-season data, specifically what we saw this year on the field to build your lines and you build your model, this line has to be more than 3.5, right? Like the Ravens were a significantly better team in every aspect all season long. The other side has Patrick Mahomes. That's clearly baked into the market, clearly why we're at this spot. Is it baked in enough, or am I completely off base? And this is 3.5 based off of numbers only.
It's a good question. And I grade my teams at this point. They're 100% based on this season's ratings. I'm not using past year's data to inform my numbers. And based on this season's ratings, I still make it 3.1 for the Ravens. So I think the number is too high, which I think is probably in a minority position among people that do model, because the difference between my data and I think what a lot of people use is sort of philosophically, most data is based on outcomes, binary outcomes, right? And so one really obvious example of this is when MVS drops that touchdown pass against Philadelphia. In reality, there's no way of knowing exactly what the percentage chance is of him catching that ball. You can run all kinds of models of like velocity of the ball and separation and how close it was to his chest and how likely MVS is to catch passes in certain different whatever, all that kind of stuff. But I do know that I can get closer by guessing than I can by using the result of that play, because the result of that play was 0%. There was 0 for 1 on that play. And I think it was probably closer to about 85, 90%, but whatever the percent is, my grading system is built around trying to take the predictive elements of plays and spit that out into numbers. And based on that over the course of the whole season, that was only one play. There's plenty of other examples. The Chiefs have the most drops, I think, in the NFL, depending on what data source you use. Again, how do you quantify a drop? There's a difference between a wide open drop and he catches it in the defender's helmet, jostles it out, or, he is kind of out of his reach, but sort of within his reach, he drops, all that kind of stuff. But Chiefs had the most drops. They had, that obviously that offsides by Tony was huge against the Bills. They had those drops against Detroit. It's been all year. And so based on my numbers, the Chiefs actually are the number 2 offense in the NFL based on this year's numbers. And so I think the whole sky is falling, Chiefs offense is terrible this year. I think all of that's been overblown. And some of it was recency bias, right? Their worst offensive performance was against the Raiders late in the season. And they also had a bad game against Denver kind of in the middle of the season. But I think when bettors are kind of skeptical about the Chiefs and they have that complete dud that everyone was watching late in the season, and then they never really had a chance to kind of rectify it. They did what they could against the Bengals. They had bad red zone performances in that game, but they still covered the spread. They beat the Dolphins, but the Dolphins were banged up at linebacker and secondary. They beat the Bills, but they were banged up at linebacker. But what I've seen is an offense that knows what it's doing and knows how to capitalize on mistakes. And so, based on the entire season, based on all my metrics, I think the Chiefs offense is underrated. And that's a crazy thing to say with Patrick Mahomes, but it's true based on the market rating. So on that side of the ball, I think I have confidence in the Chiefs offense, but this will be the toughest test of the entire season because the Ravens defense is obviously very, very good. And last week I talked about how I liked the Texans prospects because the Ravens defense had thus far had its best games against well-schemed offenses, but not elite quarterbacks. And then they really shut down CJ Stroud, which was very impressive. But the thing that I noticed in watching that film was that CJ Stroud was not anticipating pressure pre-snap. He was reacting to it really, really well. Like when the blitz comes in, he was getting rid of the ball. He was avoiding negative plays. That is a very, very difficult thing to do. but he always seemed a little bit surprised at where the pressure was coming from. And I think Patrick Mahomes' experience and just incredible understanding and field vision of what's happening on every play, I think that will help him against this Ravens defense to be more successful than CJ Stroud was. So it will be a struggle. It won't be the Bills game where the Chiefs just roll up and down the field pretty much every drive. It's going to be tough, but I think Mahomes, in that playoff level focus with an offense that I think is pretty good overall, I think has a chance. The last thing I want to point out is that while the Ravens defense is very, very good, their run defense hasn't been all that effective. And the Chiefs have been capitalizing on the ground game with Isaiah Pacheco when he's been healthy in a way that has really helped their offense and take some of the pressure off of Mahomes. It's had a visibly noticeable impact on Mahomes' calmness in the pocket when they can run the ball. So I think that's going to be something to look out for. If Joe Thuney doesn't play, that obviously hurts the Chiefs. But overall, I think this will be a game where the Chiefs do have some offensive success, just not quite as much as they had last week.
Yes, still waiting on the Thuney news. Torn pec sounds like a painful. Strained pec sounds like a painful injury to play through, especially in the interior of the offensive line. But yeah, Connor, how about for you when the Chiefs have the ball? Like, have they found something offensively? Like we've seen, so Clark's ratings are very generous, and I would say he's acknowledging off market comparatively to like what a lot of mainstream like originators are making in terms of like yards per drive, points per drive, efficiency stuff. They're still top 10. They're like barely. They're like 9th and 10th in those metrics. They have not been like the dominant team that we've seen previously. Mike Macdonald's been awesome this season. They've dealt with a ton of injuries as well defensively. Like we don't know what's going on with Marlon Humphrey in this game, for instance. I think pieced together a ton of like pressure from no-name guys. Like I've joked here about like Kyle Van Noy was doing spots on McAfee for like the first month of the season. And then it's like all of a sudden getting like 70% snap rate and like playing awesome for the Ravens. So like McDonald does a lot there, and they do a really good job at like piecing it together, and they're really pliable based off of whatever their opponent's doing. But again, the other side is also Patrick Mahomes. So what are your thoughts on, Chiefs having the ball here and match up against the Ravens?
Yeah, I think Clark brought up a good point here, specifically with the Chiefs running game against this Ravens run defense here. So, on the season, they are 15th in success rate, 13th in EPA per play, allowing 4.47 yards per carry to opposing running backs. And I think that was part of the handicap last week, but we ran into issues because one, the Texans were running the ball into loaded boxes. So basically it was like they would go under center, they would do heavier sets. Against those sets, the Ravens are like elite, allowing 3.4 yards per carry. They're 10th in success rate. Against out of shotgun or low, like lighter boxes, they're allowing over 5 yards per carry. And I think that's something that the Chiefs are going to be able to do here. So the Chiefs have been running mostly in heavier sets. They had a lot of success running against Buffalo with 2 tight ends, but that came against, again, Buffalo team that had literally was starting third string linebackers by the end of the game, and the Miami team that had a bunch of injuries all over as well. And so I think when they're looking at it this week, they need to be spreading it out and then running against those looks in lighter boxes instead. And so I think that's how the Chiefs will have success here, because frankly, I have a lot of concerns about this passing game here, at least a reasonable amount of concerns, because this Ravens defense is like an amoeba. Like they're not really high in man or zone or cover 2 or cover 3. Like they just do a lot of different stuff schematically based on what opponents do. And I would say if Patrick Mahomes had Tyreek Hill, like you can just overcome anything. Like it doesn't really matter. But you have Travis Kelce, who's been, reignited to some extent, again, against literally the worst linebacker core that you'll play all year in 2 consecutive games. And then now you're playing against good linebackers, like legit, awesome linebackers that the Ravens have. And so I think that's a big step up. So I have a little bit of concerns about Kelce just magically being open and having his, looking as rejuvenated as possible. And then Rashee Rice, I mean, he's good, don't get me wrong, but I'm just not sure he's quite like alpha wide receiver 1, breakthrough, anything that they're throwing at him good. And the rest of the guys, are, I would say, arguably the worst ancillary options in the league. I've been down on MVS. He had his best game of the season last week. Mecole Hardman played atrocious. He doesn't even belong in the field. Sky Moore is terrible and may come back. Literally some of the worst options there. They just need to be their field stretchers. They run cardio. That's it. And so I'm sure they'll be able to get it done. I'm sure they'll find a way to scheme up, relatively consistent chain moving stuff. But if they fall behind, I worry about them like consistently catching up in that scenario offensively. And so if they're able to stay on schedule with the run, if they're able to, run consistently, I think that they'll have probably a reasonable amount of success. But I just worry that if the Ravens are able to work against that, they won't. So that's kind of my pushback on the offense. But I think that I think they're in a reasonably good situation because the Ravens have shown that, teams can run the ball against them from time to time.
I like that stuff. I mean, really, the Patriots want to get involved here. They definitely, in terms of ancillary receivers, they would like to be in the team picture as far as we're seeing it's in the league. But I think the Monken Spags matchup on the other side of the ball, I think, is probably one of the more interesting ones here as well. The Chiefs will blitz. They will not blitz necessarily in the same way or the same amount that the Texans did last week. They've on the season blitzed at the 12th highest rate in the league, but they also send their corners and the slot corners at a top 5 rate. So I think we're going to see pressure for Lamar in a very different way, faster, athletic blitzers, blitzers that make scrambling a little bit harder, and which is obviously impactful in terms of Lamar. But I want to circle back to the Texans game too, because I feel like we had a fairly good handicap as it pertains to Houston disguising their coverage pre and post snap. I think the shift that we saw from the Texans down the stretch once Stingley returned at corner, I think, again, we talked about how that was able to kind of stifle the Browns, and it's a little bit different here last week, but it worked early. Like at the half, the score was tied. Lamar did not look sharp. He did not look comfortable. The numbers bear that out as well. I think like in the first half, the Ravens averaged 3.9 seconds to throw. It's a lot. 83.3% of his dropbacks took longer than 2.6 seconds. He averaged just 4.7 yards per attempt. And again, like I felt really encouraged. Like it's 10-10 where we were at in terms of like what we thought was going to happen. Lamar was flushed out. He had to run. Second half, 9.1 yards per attempt. The time to throw dropped from 3.9 to 2.5. Just 34% of those dropbacks had a seconds to throw longer than 2.5. So like kudos to Todd Monken neutralizing the blitz. They got the ball out really quick to playmakers, just quick in the flat. It took the pressure off Lamar. He didn't have to drop back and diagnose what Houston was doing in the back end. Just run or get the ball out. And that's been how they've handled pressure all season. Lamar this season, career high in completion percentage against the blitz, career low and average depth of target. So he's not taking, deep chances. He's just trying to get the ball out. So how they kind of handle that here, Clark, I think is going to be very interesting. Can Lamar still be a massive weapon with his legs, which I think he will be?
Yeah, I think there's two ways the Ravens can really take hold of this game. And the first is if they can run the ball consistently well. If they can get 6, 7, 8 yards on first down consistently, Lamar Jackson is just too good and too elusive to not be able to convert on 2nd and 3, 3rd and 3. Those are like downs where they just have so many options. The way their offense is schemed up, it gives him options in the flat, gives him options to take the ball himself, gives him options to hand the ball off if there's an opening up the middle. So I think the Chiefs are going to have to defend the run well on early downs. And then the second way that I think the Ravens can win this game is if they don't contain him, scrambling. We saw a lot of him getting downfield against the Texans in a way that hasn't been a priority during the regular season. So I was impressed with the Ravens coaching and Lamar Jackson's decision-making in that game. If he's able to consistently get through the backfield, right? The more Lamar's in the backfield, the better it is for the Chiefs. The more he can get out of that backfield and escape the linebackers, the better it's going to be for the Ravens. And I think Willie Gay's health really matters for that reason. He was spying Josh Allen early in that game, and then he got hurt. And then Josh Allen just kind of ran wild for a little while. And it was kind of jarring to see the difference. So Willie Gay makes a big difference. If the Chiefs linebackers are all healthy, then I think that they can at least prevent those big plays on the ground game. But I haven't been as impressed with the Ravens offense, I think, as most people have. They did have 3 really dominant offensive performances in the Miami game, which was their best offensive performance of the year, the Detroit game and the Seattle game. Those games were absolute dominant offensive performances, very impressive. But other than that, they haven't been consistently grading all that well for me. They're pretty inconsistent. Lamar Jackson takes a lot of sacks when he's under pressure. When their run game isn't working and it becomes down to their pass game, they've been pretty inconsistent. He's been a little bit reliant on big plays downfield. And so, I think people have rewritten what happened in the 49ers game because it was such a high profile game. And going in, it was, is Brock Purdy the MVP or is Lamar the MVP? And then the Ravens won by so much that Lamar became the MVP overnight. But he didn't even actually play that well in that game. The offense wasn't that great. I'm going to recap every drive they had in that game. They had a 3-and-out. They had a negative drive for a safety, a field goal that was aided by a defensive pass interference on 3rd down, a 53-yard touchdown drive that needed a 4th down conversion, a negative 3-yard drive for a field goal because they got the ball so far in San Francisco territory, another field goal drive, a 44-yard touchdown drive because of a penalty on the punt, a 9-yard touchdown off of an interception, and then a field goal drive and 2 punts. And so it wasn't this kind of offensive performance where they worked the 49ers defense. It was mostly just the Ravens defense putting them in good positions and then the Ravens doing enough to capitalize. And the Chiefs defense this year has been very, very good. And I'm not sure that, like, I know that people know that, but for some reason there's this expectation the Ravens are just going to be able to do whatever they want. And I think the Chiefs are pretty well structured with Spagnuolo to stymie Lamar, every other drive probably. I think they'll be able to force the Ravens into either a turnover or a punt. So I think that gives the Chiefs offense enough chances to eventually cover the spread and hopefully win outright, because I have both spread and money line on the Chiefs. But closing argument is that this is Patrick Mahomes. Okay, this is Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. He's an underdog. He is a unique player, and I don't mean that he's like the best player. He is the best player. I mean, he's unique in that his performance splits against good defenses are vastly different than any other quarterback to ever play the game. He excels he lifts up his game in the toughest spots. His performance when trailing is better than his performance with the lead, which is different from every other quarterback in the history of the NFL. He is a unique player that rises to the occasion in these spots against these tough defenses. And I don't care who his weapons are. You're giving him 4 points. I don't care that it's on the road. I don't care that his lineman can't hear his voice. This is Patrick fucking Mahomes getting points in the playoffs, and he's going to win this game.
Love it.
Oh, man. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. And that's kind of where I was at, in the sense that, like, and I joked, we were talking a little bit before the show, like, I feel like this is one of those very clear spots post game where you're just going to be able to say to yourself, well, of course Baltimore won. They were the best team all season in comparison to the Chiefs. They had some dominant performances, like Clark just highlighted, against really good teams, and the Chiefs like just stumbled even in the division against the Raiders and Broncos, and like just looked very mediocre at times. Or you're going to be like, well, of course Mahomes won and covered. He's fucking Patrick Mahomes. He wins and covers. This is just what he does. Why would we were getting more than 3 on Pat Mahomes. Why in the world am I holding a Ravens ticket? So I just feel like it's so easy in the middle or the end of that game to be like, well, yeah, hindsight, like this makes all the sense in the world. Like, of course, either way. I'm with Clark. I have no appetite for a non-Patrick Mahomes betting opportunity on Sunday. I want Mahomes. I want more than 3 if I can get it. Right now it's available 3.5. We'll kind of monitor, but like I feel like there's a pretty good appetite for the Ravens in the marketplace, and we've seen some 4s. Man, if we're going to get 4, I don't know where we're going. Like, I don't think we get to 4.5 because I think you get a little bit of buyback, but like, I don't know that we're done per se. I know you're maybe a little bit on the other side. I know you got some earlier action in 3 versus a 3.5, but any additions to what's going on with the Monken versus Spags side of this handicap?
Yeah, I did play some Ravens -3 at open just to be transparent, just tailing off of some sharp action that I knew, some pretty well-respected bettors. And they were just like, hey, this is going to close probably 3.5, 4. So I'm like, you know what, I'll get in here, and I can always buy out at a better number if I want to.
I saw it and I ignored it. I don't care.
I know. It's one of those things where when my initial handicap, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then the more that I did the research, I was kind of like, yeah, I don't really know how much I like this anymore. And so, I don't really know. I think if I had to play it now, it would probably be a Chiefs +4 or Chiefs +3.5. But like personally, based on my personal handicap, but I do think that there's an edge here for this Ravens offense here against the Chiefs. But I think that it's counterable. So the more that I was, reading into it, so like obviously the Ravens rushing offense has been pretty solid here. Chiefs run defense, not that good. 23rd in rushing success rate allowed, 28th in EPA per play. And what's interesting to me is that the Ravens have the second most runs out of the gun. They're averaging over 5 yards per carry. Chiefs are bottom 5 in success rate allowed, and yards per carry out of the gun. It's like over 5 yards per carry as well. Lamar accounts for around 128 of those of the 340 carries out of the gun. The Chiefs have really struggled to guard, mobile quarterbacks this year. But then every year we say this against the Chiefs. We say Chiefs defense stinks, and we've had way worse units. Like, I mean, the Chiefs defense is legit good this year, but like we've had way worse units before. Their run defense was bottom 5 in basically every metric coming into last year's Super Bowl. And what did they do? They came out and stopped the run. Miles Sanders didn't do shit. Like, I mean, they forced the Eagles into like a pass first offense almost. And that was kind of the Eagles counterpunch. It was like they came out and started doing these quick passes to AJ Brown, to Devonta Smith, things like that. And that was like, okay, well, they're going to we're going to do that. And then we're going to try and run. And the running just didn't work. So they had to pass basically the whole game. And I think personally, that was one of their downfalls and why they didn't end up winning. But I don't think that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are really capable of that. And I think that's kind of the difference here. And the issue is that like the Ravens can't do that. If they come out in a pass first offense, I mean, they're toast. Like that's like, they have no shot of winning. Like they're going to lose by 30 points. But if they are able to successfully run the ball, as we've seen teams successfully run the ball in the Chiefs almost all year, then I think that sets up the pass. It sets up the pass a lot. So Clark mentioned that too. Like that's the Ravens' path to winning. It's a dominant running game, setting up the pass, and being really successful that way. Like I think Lamar can execute that. My issue with this game is that if either team, in my opinion, is forced to become like a drop back quarterback, goes down 10 points, fourth quarter, 10 minutes left, you have to drop back every play. I think they're losing by more than 10. Like it's just they're not set up for success in those situations just because of how good the Ravens secondary is and defense is and how good the Chiefs secondary is. So like, especially Lamar, I think that's a complete disaster situation. So for me, I think the most likely outcome for me is that the Ravens are able to run the ball well and have some success, and they kind of cause enough turmoil that it'll be like a 3-point game. So that's kind of tough for me. Like, it's just like I go back and forth on it. But yeah, played Ravens -3. If I had to play it now, probably Chiefs +4. Probably just going to sit on my Ravens -3 position. I don't know. Might be LCLV, but I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it'll be a good game, but what I alluded to at the beginning, like, the days of teams just like dropping back 50 times and throwing the ball and slinging it against like shitty defenses, like that's just not existing, especially in this game. So, it's just, I think the key to both teams winning is running the ball and moving the ball on third downs and like chain moving situations, honestly, which is kind of lame, but I think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, elite football in the playoffs, third down conversions, red zone conversion rate, like very basic stuff that's not super predictive ahead of time, but very descriptive in the end when we look back and like, oh, were you able to execute on third down? Were you able to convert your red zone opportunities? Boom. So yeah. It's going to be going. What do you get, Clark, to close?
I think the hard thing is going to be the difficulty level for the Chiefs offense is going to be way higher. The way the crowd got into the Texans game and affected it, like how many false start penalties they had, they were so loud. And Patrick Mahomes said the other day that Baltimore is one of the few places he's played where it's so loud that he can't speak to his tackles. So there are some things that I think if the Ravens get some momentum and make it tough on the Chiefs early, we've seen games where Mahomes starts to press, and I think that's the way the Ravens cover is they have to kind of get to Mahomes early, get the crowd involved, and kind of lean on that, and then use that advantage to kind of crush them in the run game late. I think that's the script for the Ravens cover. That's what I'm most afraid of. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. I think that's a good transition to the afternoon NFC games. We have the Lions, a team who's benefited greatly, I think, from having a raucous crowd for 2 games on the road now in San Francisco. This line opened San Francisco -7. Spent some time out at 6.5, is now basically 7 -110 across the board. Totals dipped a little bit. We opened around 51.5. Most spots 51 flat, which is a key number, which is important. FanDuel down to 50.5 -115 to the over here. Injuries I think are massive here. In particular, one injury in particular, the Deebo Samuel injury, I think matters a lot. The Niners, they survived it. They lost him early. Had that in combination, but not even combination. Like these things are correlated. It's the worst performance of Brock Purdy's young career in a spot where everyone was really struggling to kind of process what they were seeing. I do think weather was a problem there as well. That should not be an issue here. Again, Deebo status in the air, not practicing as of today on Wednesday as we record. The splits with Deebo on and off the field, like we've talked about it early this season. Like we kind of had one Niners. That was the Niners when they were healthy. And then we had that Niners little patch where there was no Trent Williams and no Deebo, and they lost 3 straight. They were completely beatable. But from a yards per play standpoint, Deebo's on the field, 7.3 yards per play. Deebo's off the field, 5.9 yards per play. We're talking about very league average, mediocre offense. EPA takes a nosedive as well. Success rate, 52.3%. all the way down to 44.3%. So like, I think his status matters greatly. I want to know it personally before I engage in anything here in this market, Connor. I have not yet, but I guess we could talk Niners offense first. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I played some Niners -6. Our buddy, Silva said drop the anvil on Niners -6.5. And I was like, you know what? I'm not dropping the anvil, but I'll probably play a little bit here because I do think this probably should be 7. And that's where we're about at right now. We'll get into the other side of the handicap later, but I do still would probably lean Niners here. I mean, this Lions run D has been really good, but they've, shown leaks at time, down to just 10th in success rate, 4th in EPA per run. But what is interesting though, 49ers are like, a Shanahan scheme. So they run a super high rate of zone runs, like top 3 in the league. Lions against zone runs, just allowing 3.6 yards per carry, allowing a 46% success rate though, which is 13th. So it's like the run D is good, but not completely infallible. And I think that kind of matters here in this spot, especially if the Niners don't have Debo. But I mean, the biggest key here is like this Lions secondary. I think it's pretty bad and pretty exposable here. I mean, allowing, since they're by 303 passing yards per game, 8.7 yards per attempt. I mean, the Niners still have George Kittle. They still have Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I don't think Juwan Jennings is awesome, but he's like a fine chain moving slot guy. They have other weapons that like they can at least utilize here outside of Debo. Now, Debo, I think would, raise this to another level and make me probably bet more at Niners -7, but I do think that the offense has success. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them skew pass heavy again, even without Debo, just being like, hey, we don't want to establish the run specifically here in this spot against the Lions. We're just going to try and pass it a little bit more. But I think either way, they have reasonable success and score, a good amount of points here. So I don't have too much on this side of the handicap outside of just like a on par Niners game, I would say, if not a little bit above, against this Lions defense.
Clark, are we getting a little bit of a discount here? The Niners, or at least maybe the perception of what the Niners offense is based off of what we saw last from Brock Purdy. Now, again, like he led them to a win and a drive at the end to get there on the back of Christian McCaffrey a lot. But I mean, obviously the performance is pretty poor. Do you think that performance has impacted like maybe what you thought this from a look ahead line was going to be and where we've opened up?
I don't think we're getting much of a discount at all. I was looking forward to getting a discount, and I just don't think it happened. Yeah. I think the Debo thing is potentially a little bit overplayed. I really think Debo matters. I think he's a fantastic player. But when you're looking at those splits, there's a couple nuances you have to add in. One is that 2 of those games were weather games, and we know that Purdy just can't throw the ball in the rain, like twice now. Terrible. Trent Williams was out for some of those Debo games. Like the overlap of Trent Williams being out was massive. He's a huge part of what they do offensively. And then third, 2 of those games were games where Debo started and got injured early on. And in both of those games, it looked like he was going to be a big part of the game plan from the get-go. I mean, last week, he touched the ball twice, I think, on their opening drive and then got hurt. It was clear that he was part of their – and because of the way that he plays, his element in the offensive game plan can't be replaced by guys like Juwan Jennings. He's a unique player. So I think that context pushes me a little bit off overweighting the difference between Debo. But the markets are indicating that Debo is probably going to play because it's -7, pushing even higher in some spots. That's a lot of points to give a team that has not looked all that impressive the last couple of weeks. They struggled to beat Green Bay, legitimately struggled. That wasn't variance or bad luck. That was a dogfight that the Packers easily could have won. So I think the 7 is just like a lot of other people feel the same way I do, which is I was looking forward to betting the Niners on a discount, and then it just never happened. But I do think the Niners offense will have some success here. The Lions have been exploitable downfield, and the 49ers are the type of team that capitalize against defensive mistakes. And there will be plenty of defensive mistakes to capitalize against. Their run game has been pretty doesn't really matter who they're playing. They're pretty successful on the ground. Christian McCaffrey is a big part of that. The run scheme is a big part of that. And I think even if Debo doesn't play, going into the game knowing that you don't have Debo, I think is different than missing him early in the game when you've built a game plan around him. So I do think the 49ers are going to have a lot of success here, especially if they can get the lead and hold the lead, and then they've got everything at their disposal, and the Lions are going to be on their heels and in a different environment that they've been in a while. So I think this is a good spot to kind of see a bounce back performance from the 49ers offense.
It's interesting because the prop market does not expect Debo to play. So the prop market has Ayuk at like 80 receiving yards, which is by far his highest line of the season, and has Kittle at like 60, whereas like Kittle's normal lines is like low 50s. Ayuk's normal line is like mid 60s. Like, that's maybe even low 60 sometimes. So that's what I think is interesting there is like they're like 80 to 90% of the way of like Debo not playing, I would say.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting and impactful. I mean, it is also a soft matchup because that's part of it too, right? Like, so even in that game last week, we kind of all agreed, like, hey, Baker, great job this season. None of us really think Baker is fantastic. They still carved up the Lions secondary and like, kind of came back at the end in a spot where like they were able to make chunk plays. And I just can't see a scenario where they're not like the San Francisco offense without any rain being able to not make chunk plays offensively. Now, again, the Lions can score as well. And, especially at 7, the backdoor ability is, a little bit terrifying with that large of a number if they can stay within it, though. I think like it's very simple here. Like, I think that Jared Goff he's maybe a little bit, I think he's underrated. In the sense of
underrated or overrated?
Underrated. In this instance, right? Because the quarterback position, the quarterback position is the ask is vast, right? But in the one scenario, which happens more times than not, and then that is the quarterback drops back and is not pressured, and he is kept clean. Jared Goff is fantastic. Now, again, that is not all that entails playing quarterback, but that happens more frequently than any other scenario when you drop back. Now, can he do that here? Can he do that against the Niners, who like to sit back in a lot of zone, who don't have necessarily scheme pressure in a way where like they bring a bunch of different like exotic looks? They can kind of beat you straight up with their guys up front. And I think that they can, especially if there's some offensive line injuries through the middle there. Again, like Goff is not going to be clean all game, but when he's clean, man, he takes care of the ball. He is accurate, and I think he puts the ball on these guys in a way that allows them to get yards after the catch. So now, again, he folds like a cheap shirt if someone gets near his legs or like in his pocket, or he's having to move off his pocket. He doesn't do it. So, Connor, what are your thoughts there on Goff and the offense, backdooring 7, or any other thoughts you have on the matchup?
Yeah, I really think that we see the Lions come out and just run the ball as much as possible unless the game gets out of hand. I mean, we saw the Packers go in and have success doing so for at least a good chunk of the game. And we have this Lions rushing offense, which is, as good, if not better, at full strength of their offensive line. Now it's a little banged up. Maybe they're not quite as good, but I think schematically and given their personnel, they still should be able to run the ball against the Niners team. 27th in rushing success right now in the year, 28th in EPA per play. Compare that to pass defense, 7th in dropback success rate, 5th in dropback EPA per play. And you brought it up here specifically and we talked about it last week too against the Bucs. Like Jared Goff versus the blitz is fine because he doesn't always get pressured on the blitz. Like it's not that there's multiple people coming at him that scares him. It's Jared Goff under pressure, no matter the circumstances, that causes him to have I think it's like a 45% completion rate. He is, amongst the worst in CPOE, completion percentage over expectation. It's like negative 11%. And so I dug up the stats today. When teams pressure him without blitzing, he's like among the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And that is literally what the Niners defense is built on. It is like getting pressure without blitzing. And since they got Chase Young, Daigle dug up the stat for over 40% pressure rate, among that team. And they blitz at one of the lowest rates of the league. I mean, you're talking about like 18%, 20%. So I think that is massively, massively impactful here because Jared Goff against pressure has just not really been all that good. And on top of this, we have another factor that Jared Goff's best section of the field is the middle of the field between the hash marks. And Ben Johnson has done a really good job of pushing the ball downfield in that 10 to 19 mark. Eric Eager tweeted that out. It was like 70% completion rate, like averaging over 10 yards per attempt. 49ers are number 1 in defending it in the 10 to 19 middle of the field. They are allowing like a 40% completion rate. They're top 3 in basically every single metric in that range. I mean, for me, in my opinion, like if the Lions have to go to that drop back and pass game and are not able to successfully run the ball, or they fall behind, they're just in a really dangerous situation where if they're getting pressure and they're dropping back a ton of guys, they're confusing Goff a little bit. Like it's not going to be very easy for them to move the ball. And so I really struggle to see a way that the Lions, if they fall behind, are like, I mean, again, it's another one of those things where I think they're in really, really big trouble. Whereas if they can keep the game close, if they're running the ball successfully all game, but like it has to be like kind of like the Packers game, it has to be like a 3.5+ quarters of running the ball and being able to play off of that run. I think they'll be able to move the ball at least somewhat well. But I just have concerns on a play-to-play basis that they're going to be able to do that. So I already played the Jared Goff under, passing yards, but I don't know. I do think they have success running the ball. So that's what kind of leads me. Like, I think the Niners score plenty, and I think the Lions have success running the ball, but I have concerns about the passing game there.
Yeah, play volume could be a problem in this game here, Clark, with the Niners very comfortable during the clock being slow. It's a hefty total. But again, like there's chunk plays all over here too. What are your thoughts on the Lions side when they have the football?
Yeah, I think the Lions might not find it too easy going here. I think we can all agree when Jared Goff is standing upright with no pressure and his guys are wide open in the middle of the field, he can throw the ball to them. Like, good job. You can play.
Well, look, when you look at some of the other quarterbacks in this league, actually all of them, when you look at like highly accurate throws, I forget what the account was. Football Insight, they were using some some data from Fantasy Points. Highly accurate throws versus like PFF's turnover worthy play rate. Goff is in a tier completely by himself.
Yeah.
He is off the charts in both of them. Now, again,
he's in one of the best schemed offenses in the NFL behind one of the best offenses in the NFL. Guys are
that's
wide
what he's got to
open.
do. Yeah, that's his job, though. His job is to execute it when it happens, right? So
you're right.
He does it
I'm
in
just
a
saying,
great way.
I'm saying Jared Goff, if they get to Jared Goff, it's gonna be a long day. That's the bottom line.
That I agree with too, for sure.
I think the 49ers defense has struggled because of the way that it's structured, like really, really good up front, excellent linebackers. They close on tackles very quickly. Because of the way they're structured, they have done a good job of shutting down offenses that rely on good offensive line play. So teams that maybe don't have an elite quarterback, but they just consistently get good gains because they're setting up good plays and winning up front. So they crushed Dallas, right? They really crushed Philadelphia. They did well against, I'm kind of looking at my numbers right now. The teams they struggled with, Joe Burrow when he was healthy in the Bengals, Kirk Cousins in the Vikings, and Matthew Stafford in the Rams. Quarterbacks that are capable of overcoming bad offensive line play. And I think the Lions kind of fit that first category much more, which is relying on good offensive line play and things being easy. They're not going to be easy. Jared Goff isn't going to have open guys over the middle of the field because Fred Warner is a monster. Dre Greenlaw is a monster. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for Detroit. And I think if they get behind, if the run game gets taken off the table from the Lions, that is sort of a downhill. They're not going to recover from that, in my opinion. Jared Goff is just not good enough to say, hey, you're down 7 against this 49ers defense and you have 2 minutes. You can't run the ball. You got to pass it. Like, that's not a situation I want to be in if I'm Detroit. So I think it sort of depends on how well the 49ers offense does, right? It's like a balancing act. Both of these teams are, when it rains, it pours. We saw what happened to Detroit when they lost the edge against Baltimore. It just went completely, tits up. And the 49ers are the same way. They sort of established the edge against the Cowboys, absolutely crushed them. Couldn't get that edge against Baltimore, struggled, right? And so I think this is a game that kind of tilts. We should probably have a sense of who's going to win this game pretty early on. I think it's going to be, either a 49ers blowout or the Lions keep the game within a field goal or a touchdown the whole way and have their whole arsenal on display. But if I had to pick one, I would think the 49ers are being a little bit undervalued here. I'm not betting it because I think the line is sharp. My numbers make it under 7, but my angles make it 49ers. And so when that happens, I'm just sort of like hands off. I would like the over because I think both offenses will have some success, but one, I'm not convinced the Lions are going to have success, right? This could easily be a 38-10 kind of game, which wouldn't clear the total. And then the other thing is both of these teams are capable of really slowing the game down if they want to. And so whichever team has the lead at the end, I could see them bleeding the clock successfully. We've seen the Lions play very, very quickly. I wonder if they'll slow down in this one, knowing that, creating variance by reducing the number of plays might actually be better for them. Whereas in the past, they've been the better team and they've wanted to go the other way on that. So I think there's plenty of reasons to caution me off the over. This is a no play. I have futures on 49ers and I'm riding with those. So go 49ers.
Connor, you want to do Niners team total and alts, right?
I might be in an alts. I don't know. Maybe some minus 19.5 or something like that. Who knows? It's kind of fun. I don't know about the team total is tough. What is it even at this week? I got, sick after betting them last week and, they were just looked terrible. It's not good.
It's hefty. Yeah. We're probably right around 29.5, 30 based off of this.
I'm looking at I've been writing the score first and win lose bets this offseason. I'm like undefeated on this. I'm sort of interested in so the Lions took the ball first against Tampa Bay. And I think they would do the same thing against San Francisco. So I think whoever wins the toss, the Lions get the ball first. But I think that's been priced into the markets now because the last couple of weeks they've been getting steamed. People have identified these props like I have. I actually think there might be value on the other side because if the Lions are going to get the ball first and the 49ers score first, that's really bad for the Lions, right? Because that means they got the ball, they didn't score. The 49ers got the ball, they did score. And so you might be able to get I'm looking at the values now, but 49ers to score first and money line is plus 115. That's not a great price, but it's just I'm looking at ways to sort of capitalize on the idea that the Lions start slow and finish slow, right? So I don't know if that's 49ers win both half, those kinds of props. I'm probably gonna have a little bit of money scattered around those, but nothing too serious.
When the Texans got the ball and then just went straight 3 and out, I was like, oh boy, this might be a long one. I was like, this is not good.
I didn't have it on Texans. I had it on I had Packers to score first and lose.
Oh, it's Packers. Okay.
Yeah. I tried to get the Texans one. Yeah.
The Packers. Oh, you had the Texans. The Packers is exactly how I scripted it up. They went down, kicked the field goal. I was like, all right, Packers scored first. Now I have a big plus money line on the San Francisco 49ers. And then they almost blew it.
I live bet the Niners like 5 times during that game. I was like at some party and I'm like sitting there. I'm just like smashing the button. I'm like, they got to do better. I'm like, next drive, it's got to happen. And they just kept playing like shit.
It was ugly.
I mean, Brock Purdy played legitimately the worst 3 quarters of football that I've seen in a while, and then played fine at the end. I mean, but it was
so bad.
His lows are a lot lower than I would like, to be honest.
I mean, he was missing badly. Like, I wish you could give him negative accuracy scores for some of those throws. Like, it weren't 0% throws; they were like negative 40% throws.
Yeah,
so bad.
That's that completion percentage over expectation, right? That is, well, I mean, that's a binary yes or no. But yeah, it was pretty rough. So yeah, all right. So we're all kind of Niners more than anything. There was really no pro Lions stuff in there, which I think
would it. If it got to 7.5, Clark, like say Debo plays, if it got to 7.5, would you play the Lions? Or no. Because you're just like, after doing this show with you for a year and, understanding how you bet for 2 years, you're like, totally fine taking the maybe somewhat gross value, based if your model's showing. And that seems like something that would pop, but I guess I'm sure you just have the Niners very high, rightfully so.
I'm not, so it depends on the maturity of the market, right? So we're at the point where the amount of money it would take to move the line to San Francisco minus 7.5 is a meaningful amount of money from winning bettors, right? So if my model is off at that point in the week, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, look, there's value on my model now, right? That's different than openers are off, and I see a difference between my model and the opener. I'm gonna bet it no matter what the number is, just because the openers aren't that sharp. But so it matters a little bit in context. If it had opened 7.5, I probably would have put some on the Lions just because that's what my model said. I wouldn't have felt great about it, but because I really like the Niners in this game. But yeah, I would have done that, but not getting pushed that way from money.
I mean, after you bet the Jets a couple times with whatever bums, I feel like you're willing to take anyone. That's some true respect right there, honestly.
Yeah, the Jets those hurt actually.
We don't mean any ill will to the Lions or their fan base. Restoring the roar. We're really excited for you. Do not take this out of context. We're not saying you.
Jared Goff is very intelligent.
Very good. You went to Cal. I mean, Cal is a good school. Yeah, I'm sure he did excellent there. But yeah, it's going to be tough. It'd be a rematch. We'd have a rematch against the Lions on either side. Niners either get a rematch there or we get that Chiefs game rematch. Super Bowl. Yeah. So, all right, gentlemen, good stuff as always. I don't know what our Super Bowl show looks like, but just subscribe to the channel before you leave. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Find us, Move the Line, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe there. We'll be back to do a Super Bowl show, but again, the prop show will be on Friday. And again, when the off-season content starts sooner than you know it. So we appreciate you hanging out with us all season long. For Connor and Clark, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody. Producer Connor.